Thank you, everybody, for coming. And wherever you are, whether you're in DC in the beautiful spring or elsewhere, I just came down from New England yesterday, and I had forgotten that DC has a different climate than New England. And I just drove from brown and gray into pink and yellow and white. It was like magical. So I'm enjoying Washington, DC at the moment. So I'm Lisa Herrick, for anybody who doesn't know that. And today we're going to have a program focused on Virginia. We're also going to give you just a few updates about what we're up to in 31st Street. We have a new logo. We updated our logo. We've been alive for 4 years, and we've had our logo, which I have to say has sort of been beloved for 4 years, because it's a picture of where we started, which is my house on 31st Street. But after 4 years, we're sort of trying to like move into 2021, and we're updating our website. We updated our logo to make it a little bit more sort of, I don't know, clean and modern. There it is. There's the new one. We changed our motto, and I cannot tell you how much we obsessed about this. We obsessed a lot. It used to just be donate, canvas, vote, do democracy, donate, canvas, vote. And that's really what we were all about for the first 4 years. But we wanted to try to come up with a slogan that just captured a little bit more about who we are and how we identify ourselves. And so after umpteen back and forth, this is where we landed: electing Democrats through persistence and precision, both of which we believe in very strongly. So you'll see that logo everywhere. And before long, you'll be able to see our new website, which someone named Emily Mintz, who's one of our members, is volunteering an incredible amount of time to help Jim and me update it. So you'll see that eventually soon. Our teams, our state teams are launched. Each of our state teams have co-captains from the leadership team and from membership. We've had quite a few volunteers sign up for each of the states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Virginia. Really, the only team that's kind of getting their act in gear pretty quickly is the Virginia team. But it's wonderful to have a group of people on each state team already, just so that there can be conversations and ideas about how to gather information about those states, so that when it's time to become more active, people will be ready to do that. So at the moment, we're not actually urging everybody to sign up. And anybody who has not yet signed up for a state team, we're not sort of saying you better get out there and do it now. Because before long, there's really going to be quite a bit to do for Virginia. For people who are interested in canvassing in person, we're going to launch that. And there's going to be a whole variety of things to do for Virginia. So if you're feeling impatient and you haven't signed up yet for a state team, it's okay for you to donate to our Virginia digital campaign. If you haven't done that yet, we're going to just put that link in the chat a little later. But it's okay to just rest up and gather your energies to be ready to launch in a month or so, because we will need you heading later into the spring. So as Jim mentioned, we do have a guest speaker today, Andrew Whitley, who's the director of the Democratic Party in Virginia. If you weren't here when Jim mentioned this, he had his second vaccine today, and he's just not feeling all that well, but he's going to join us briefly. And so we will hear from him, but it might be a bit abbreviated. So as most of you know me, I like to start with just some sort of an introduction about kind of why we exist and why we're doing what we're doing. And today, as I often do, I'm going to read from one of Heather Cox Richardson's latest columns. If you don't subscribe to Heather Cox Richardson, I urge you to do so. She's amazing. She's a political historian, and she sends a newsletter 5 mornings a week just about what's happening. It's kind of current events, but it's through the lens of history, and it's always really interesting and thought-provoking. So this was a few days back, and I'm just gonna, I've sort of just taken excerpts from her column that I'm gonna just read you. Before I jump into that, I guess I just wanna say that I think all of us know by now, after living through the last 4 years, that the strategy that candidates and causes seem to have to get people motivated to donate or do whatever they need to do, they sort of have two strategies. They have the fear strategy. The sky is falling. If you don't donate today, all is lost. You know, you better jump in today because we need you and terrible things are going to happen if you don't donate this minute. And then the other strategy is to say, we're almost there. We're about to have a miracle. If you donate right now, we're going to get over the top and we'll bring that miracle home. And those are the endless emails that we get. I tend to ignore all of those. And what makes me grateful for 31st Street and for Jim's leadership is that we really don't do either one of those. Our message tends to be, this is what the data says. This is what our research says. This is what the discussions that we've been having with people say. This is our best guess of how to be effective. And if you want to be effective and you trust our data, you know, you can take these actions. And that really has been our strategy. At this moment, though, I guess I just sort of have to say that in terms of Virginia, we really are at a moment where it's a little bit of both, like, uh-oh, it's now or never. We better take action for Virginia or terrible things are going to happen, as we are seeing them happen in other states like Georgia. And also, if we put our minds to it this year for Virginia, good things are going to continue to happen because good things are already happening with the General Assembly in Virginia run by Democrats. They really are doing some wonderful things and they will be able to continue to do that and solidify the change in Virginia if we take action this year. So the message really is a little bit of both. It's like super important to do it because amazing things can happen and super important to do it because we're terrified of what's happening in other states. And we do not want to lose the majority in Virginia. We absolutely cannot do that. So with that in mind, I'm just going to read you a bit of Heather Cox Richardson's column from, I think it was Wednesday. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed his state's new voter suppression law last night in a carefully staged photo op. As journalist Will Bunch of the Philadelphia Inquirer pointed out, Kemp sat at a polished table with 6 white men around him under a painting of the Callaway plantation on which more than 100 Black people had been enslaved. As the men bore witness to the signing, Representative Park Cannon, a Black female lawmaker, was arrested and dragged away from the governor's office. It was a scene that conjured up a lot of history. Voting was on the table in March 1858 too. Then the US Senate fought over how the new territory of Kansas would be admitted to the Union. The majority of voters in the territory wanted it to be free, but a minority of pro-slavery Democrats had taken control of the territory's government and written a constitution that would make human enslavement the fundamental law in the state. The fight over whether this minority or the majority that wanted the territory free would control Kansas burned back east to Congress. In the Senate, South Carolina Senator James Henry Hammond, who rejected as ridiculously absurd the idea that all men are born equal, rose to speak on the subject. He defended the rule of pro-slavery minority in Kansas and told anti-slavery Northerners how the world really worked. Hammond laid out a new vision for the United States of America. He explained to his Senate colleagues just how wealthy the South system of human enslavement had made the region, and then explained that the harmonious and prosperous system worked precisely because a few wealthy men ruled over a larger class with a low order of intellect and little skill. Hammond explained that in the South, those workers were Black slaves, but the North had such a class too. They were your whole hireling class of manual laborers. These distinctions had crucial political importance, he explained. Our slaves do not vote. We give them no political power. Yours do vote, and being the majority, they are the depositories of all your political power. If they knew the tremendous secret that the ballot box is stronger than an army with banners and could combine, where would you be? Your society would be reconstructed, your government overthrown, your property divided by the quiet process of the ballot box. Heather Cox Richardson wondered how far history has taken us. It feels like the arc of history that we keep hoping swings towards justice. It feels like that arc just sometimes swings back away from justice. And the only thing that has kept it from going irrevocably backwards is the grassroots work of Democrats and people like us over the last 4 years. So in Virginia, we are poised for really a moment to think about Georgia and Virginia. It's really two examples of what could be. Thank goodness we won those 2 Senate seats in Georgia, but where everybody is like hanging by a thread. And Virginia is really the battleground in 2021. So I'm really grateful that you're all here on a Sunday afternoon. It's wonderful and it's heartening. And we're going to hear a lot more about Virginia from Jim, and we'll hear even more from Adam Whitley, hopefully if he's feeling okay. But I'm very grateful that you're here because our work for this year is really just beginning. And with that, I turn it over to Jim.
Great, great to get us going. It fits right in with what I think I'm going to talk about mostly, Lisa. So for those of you who maybe don't know me, I'm Jim Shelton, the political analyst, retired epidemiologist, and colleague of some of the people on this Zoom. So I'm going to shift to my share screen, bring up slides, because that's the best way I can communicate. And sure enough, Lisa, what do you suppose this is? Hanging by a thread, that's right. So, some people are auditory and some people are visual. So anyway, we are. And I think almost everybody knows that it's on this call, but that's why, you know, we're just we're doubling down our efforts. Okay. So our map, just to get straight what our priorities are, obviously Virginia this year with the election, but looking forward to protect our democracy nationwide, we're really focusing on key Senate races and a few other races like the governorship in Pennsylvania. So our other big priorities, we try not to, we try to stay pretty focused. Pennsylvania, of course, nearby, has a governor's race. North Carolina also a Senate race, and Pennsylvania and Georgia has a Senate race, of course, to protect that seat from Warnock. These eyes, we're like watching these other states where they're possible we might want to weigh in. And we have a particular way of going about this, of course, as Lisa mentioned. So yeah, this is our strategy, the Virginia elections. But then in these other states, it's not about funding directly these candidates. We really feel and believe that based upon the experience in Georgia and in Wisconsin, actually in 2020, that funding local grassroots groups who have year-round organizing, and we'll talk about that some more, really is the best investment for us to do now and even later to try to win those Senate seats. So that's really that's the strategy, is to do that somewhat indirect, but we think much more effective way to go about it. I'll talk about this some more, but we're really doing a lot of due diligence to find a few gems. I like to think we're working really hard for you and for us to find really the best investment, because there are literally hundreds of such organizations. And we're doing that due diligence with key informants and talking to the groups as well in our 3 states of Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, looking for that. And we'll also probably support some voter registration when those opportunities arise, and of course, anything else that might make sense as well. All right, so I am going to talk about Virginia, but if you'll indulge me, I want to talk a bit about the more general election kind of lessons and so forth. And I talked about this in the past, in the last meeting, but this is one reputable organization's best estimate of the so-called shift in voting for Biden between 16 and 20. And you may know that we had some slippage in the vote share. So just recognize this is the vote share. There actually were more blacks that voted for Biden, but the share was less. And even more of slippage with the Latino, Latinx group, and also some with the Asia, the API group. But what really carried the day actually was the white college, but also my sort of group that I think is so important, this white non-college group. And so that we need to kind of focus on a number of groups, of course. So here's an interesting quote. Future of the party is based on a multi-ethnic, multiracial working class coalition. So who do you suppose said that? Some of you in this morning may have read that Biden's working out to the working class and the labor unions. There's a nice piece on that in the Post this morning. But actually, this is Marco Rubio. This is Hope's senator. This is what he's saying, right? And he's actually onto something. So this is our, we can't yield this to these folks. We gotta go after the working class. To understand that, I think I'm going to lay out something that many of you know pretty well, but just to make it pretty clear, which is that there has been this decades-long strategy of the ultra-rich that basically it's sometimes referred to as the conservative dilemma, and it's occurred many times in history when the wealthy class is in power and needs to deal with a large body of working class and middle class voters. But it's much more problematic in a situation like this now when there's an extremely large income inequalities. So the basic strategy is divert and distract our voters with divisive, emotional, sometimes racially loaded issues and messages. So those voters vote against their economic interests and views. So a number of people have sort of made this point, but it's really coming into focus. If you just watch what's going on with Fox, or not that I watch Fox that much, but the stuff that I see, you can really see it happening in real time. So what are these issues? I got a bunch of them here just to kind of lay them on the table. And I don't claim that this is exhaustive, but this will be familiar to you. Government is the enemy, right? Immigrants, welfare cheats, that has racial overtones. Murderers at large, right? Willie Horton, again, racial overtone. That's going to be an issue in Virginia, by the way, where there's a kind of a argument about the parole board releasing people inappropriately. The Republicans will use that. Urban riots. I'm choosing my words here, to be a bit sort of provocative. Gun confiscation, defund police, late term abortion. Here you go, bathroom security. Save women's sports, right? That's what we're seeing now. We're going to save women's sports from transgender people. Let's get some more here. Cancel culture, Dr. Seuss, we got to save Dr. Seuss. And then of course, socialism. So they run all these things by us. Now, the Democrats have all these economic issues that these middle class and working class voters like. They love the American Rescue Plan. They love minimum wage increase. They love infrastructure. They want good public schools. They want affordable health care. They don't like the wealthy tax cut. They like Medicare and Social Security. They like Biden's COVID pandemic activism. And here's something that people are not aware of, but it's pretty clear that Democrats are actually better on the economy, even though there's this myth that they aren't. So we have all these issues that these voters really agree with. We don't do a very good job of sort of getting that across. And part of it is because most voters don't even think that much in terms of issues that way. We need to take a page to some extent out of this framing the way the Republicans have. So sure enough, I've got a formulation of sort of kind of the salient issues, the way I think we ought to be going about this, which is the greedy 1%, right? Insurrection, radical extremists, anti-democratic, which means anti-American. I mean, I'm just throwing this stuff out, but I think we don't see this kind of stuff nearly as much as we should. Trump's corruption, pandemic denialism, climate catastrophes. Why? I mean, we can talk about global warming, but people can relate to the fact that they were freezing to death in Austin. Toxic chemicals, crumbling schools, hospitals closing. So it's not just Medicaid expansion, which is a more abstract concept, but hospitals closing. Let's see what else I've got here. Weapons of war, right? So it's not just gun safety, it's the fact that these automatic weapons are weapons of war. Do we need weapons of war? Here you go, vaginal ultrasound, remember that from Virginia. I think we got one or two. Bathroom restrictions, and of course, racism. So I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not a communication sort of formulator, other people are, but I feel like we too often are constrained by wanting to, you know, have positive messaging. We learn in Psychology 101 that positive messaging works and negative messaging doesn't. But in fact, I think we need to get over that because it doesn't turn out to be that true. We need to do both. But again, one of the nice things, the great things about digital outreach is that not only is it flexible and relatively inexpensive, but you can target these issues in a more sort of out there kind of way to voters that would be more receptive to it. Anyway, I just thank you for indulging me to put that out on the table. But here's an example, right? So in Virginia, here's our former Speaker of the House in Virginia. Now, he's got, this is on the internet, he's got a target audience in mind. Now, who do you suppose that is? It's not you and me. He's got this in mind because he wants to get the nomination for governor. He's reaching out to Republican voters. You know, I'm sure they got a voter file and that's where it's going to. But that's the way that, you know, smart folks, you know, he wants to show that he can defend the Second Amendment as much as anybody else. So I think democratic messages in these two tracks, a positive, often economic message, but also something where we hold Republicans accountable with salient messaging. We go on the offensive early. We too often at legislature races, we saw this in North Carolina, and I think in Virginia year before last, we got flat-footed by not having messages. So that's why we think it's important to have digital on tap. Okay, now there is a way that's kind of a win-win to reach out to working class people across racial groups called the race-class narrative. It goes by, and it is evidence-based on a lot of good qualitative research. I hadn't heard about this specifically, maybe many of you have, but the general idea is that in messaging is to go ahead, don't be afraid about talking about race in a certain way, include it in messaging. And the idea is that you want to stress that white people will gain more from cross-racial solidarity than they will from siding with billionaires. So they have ways of testing out these messages, which are very clear in their findings. And the interesting thing is that it does resonate with white, middle, and working class so-called persuadables, even when compared to just a straight economic message. And it also resonates more positively with people of color than the straight economic message. All right, so what's an example of what I'm talking about? So this is one of their sort of standard lines. I hate to read verbatim, but to make life better for our folks, we need to invest in education, better paying jobs, make healthcare more affordable for white, black, and brown people struggling to make ends meet. This kind of message resonates very well with working class persuadable voters of all races. And if you're a reader, this is a great book called Merge Left by Ian Haney Lopez that I would recommend that goes into this. And I'm hoping we're going to see more of this approach. Okay, so shifting gears, what do you suppose this is? That's right, it's the grassroots. So we're going to talk about grassroots, okay. And again, getting back to this point about how we're working hard for you, we're really doing a lot of due diligence. These are the criteria of what we're looking for in local grassroots. You know, it's not grassroots like us, if you will. It's on the ground organizing organizations. And again, this is the lesson from Wisconsin and from Georgia. Not all of what happened in Georgia was like this, but a lot of it was. I'm not going to run through all these things, but I am going to talk just specifically about deep canvassing, which has no one single methodology, but we think, you know, that the evidence, again, evidence is that it works when it's done well and the right kind of voters. But the idea is to target specific voters and non-voters, especially low propensity voters, who are potentially supportive with extended conversation, right? This is the way by people that hopefully live in the neighborhood, though not necessarily. It's extended active listening to find out what's important to them, not connected to election time, not trying to get people to vote for a particular candidate, but to have an exchange of ideas and make for some connection. Sharing experiences that people have. It's obviously an art form, right? It's having a good conversation is like this is an art form. Some of the approaches try to get people to enlist in membership. There's an affiliate of AFL-CIO that has an approach to this. So they try to get people who are not members of AFL-CIO to sign up for this thing. And then it's repeated contact. And then ultimately a general direction toward voting. So this is part of the methodology. This is why we think having this longer term approach in these states is much better than coming in at the last minute and giving money to a Senate candidate, which is kind of what happens. All right, now I just want to say one slide on HR 1, S1, because I know a lot of people are really concerned about voter suppression, which is obviously blatantly egregious and transparent in purpose, and especially in the Georgia context. We're not really going to make a major focus on that, but we are going to defer people that are really interested in weighing in on that to efforts. And we got a link that we're going to put in the chat if you want to do something there. I will first so say that even though it's horrible and it's obviously egregious and so forth, there are some mitigations. There always are. It can cut both ways to some extent because there are a lot of low propensity Trump voters that might be dissuaded to vote as well. They're going to have major legal challenges. It may be so egregious that, you know, a lot of voters might end up voting against the Republicans for doing that. The other thing that's really important for us is that for our 3 states, especially Virginia, it doesn't really affect, Virginia's actually going the other direction. It's a lot easier to vote in Virginia now than it used to be. But also Pennsylvania and North Carolina, because of the Democratic governors, it's really around the edges. So we can still win those states with the game's rules as they are. So what's happening is on Wednesday is that Focus on Democracy and Citizens United is having a Zoom, and hopefully Aaron's going to put the link in the chat. They had one event on Sunday, raised $750,000, and the basic idea is to try to enlist support for organizations in key states, basically West Virginia and Arizona, and I guess New York, to try to get those organizations to weigh in to try to overturn the filibuster that then will be used for HR 1 and S1. So it is indirect, but on the other hand, it's a very important issue.
Jim, can I just step in here? Because I'm not quite sure. So we have a member, Betsy Krieger, who's on. She put a link in the chat also about that. I think it's the same event, but it's a different link. So I don't know. Just want, in case people are confused, Jim is just mentioning, I think, the same event that Betsy put in the chat.
Yeah, there may be different links to get to more or less the same place. Should take you
Okay.
to a mobilized signups sheet, one way or the other.
Okay, well, if you have trouble and you want to join, you can contact me or Jim and we'll figure it out with you.
Okay, so is Andrew here now, or is Andrew Whitley, is he?
You got me.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, Andrew, can you bear with me about 3 minutes before we start? Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks so much for coming. People know you're not feeling well, so we're gonna accommodate you, I hope. So just on Virginia, of course, all eyes are on it. We've already talked about this. The delegates are up for grabs, but the governor and other statewide races. Again, recall our strategy is just delegate races. We want to keep the House of Delegates, but we also feel that by supporting the delegate races, we can indirectly do more for a dollar spent through Power Up than we can if we were to give money to. And right now there are all these primaries, of course, for us, not for the Republican. Then our primary is June 8th. Here's our map. So, there are districts that are our whole district. We have incumbents. There's one or two sort of open holds, if you will, where the delegate is running, our Democratic delegate is running for, I guess, lieutenant governor. Our challenger races are outside of Richmond and down in Hampton Roads. Two of them are in primaries. Two of them are raring to go, and we'll actually have donation links on the webpage. And hopefully, once the primary is done, we'll have a slate for people to donate to, and probably for HD 51, which is one of these open holds in Prince William County. So that's for money. But we do have this 3-track approach, which is money, especially for challengers, but also canvassing. If you go back to there'll be plenty of canvassing opportunities for these incumbents in Nova and in the Richmond suburbs, but hopefully later on in the year, Hampton Roads as well. And then, of course, we have our digital voter outreach through Our States Matter, which we talked about at the last meeting, and hopefully going to support about 25 candidates for that. Our goal is about $40,000. Last I looked, we were about $32,000. If folks want to contribute today, that's great as well. So then moving on to Andrew, I told him in my email, as is our custom, that we don't usually give long introductions. We know he's not going to stay long anyway. I will say that I did work with Andrew in 2019 when he headed up the coordinated campaign, and he did a yo person's job in helping us win our General Assembly in 2019. And now he's back, and I can tell you he's at it really well and exercising great leadership to hopefully lead us on to victory. So I'm going to stop sharing and see what Andrew wants to say to us. Over.
I appreciate that. And I'm sorry that I look like death warmed over here. COVID shot number 2, it did me in way more than number 1 did. It's good to see everybody. And thanks, Jim, for that introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody here. One, I just want to say thank you guys. I'm sure it doesn't take much Googling if you don't live in Virginia, but if you do live in Virginia, it's hard to miss all the progress that's been made over these last 2 years, from the first session of, doing some really amazing stuff with, gun safety measures and raising the minimum wage over the course of, extended amount of time, to right now, abolishing the death penalty and criminal justice reform. It's all been because of people like you who, decided to jump in and help us. And so we really appreciate it more than you all will know. I think that I heard a little bit of what you said, Jim, earlier, and I think that it's a really smart and great approach about working through the delegate races. I managed Chris Hurst in 2017, his first delegates race down in Southwest Virginia. And it was your all's and folks like you, who like your excitement and passion is what is what got the excitement from the House of Delegates race transferred up to Governor Northam, and we saw what happened there. So again, thanks for all that you are doing. So I think that in Virginia this year, we are, there's a couple of things that I want to note, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at the party to try to make sure that we are ready for 2021, but also learn the lessons from 2019. We right now, because of the delay in the census, we're having to run under the same maps that we currently had in 2019, which is a disappointment for us because we think that Virginia, and the way that our population is shifting to more, urban centers, we would have probably had more favorable maps if we would have gotten new maps. That's an issue, and that's something that we're making sure that that we're talking about, because if you all don't know, this is the same map, minus a couple of things that the Supreme Court helped us out with in 2019. This is by and large the same map that Republicans gerrymandered in 2010 to keep the majority. So these districts were drawn 10 years ago to favor Republicans, and it was thanks to people like you that really helped us change that in 2017 and 2019. But this year, almost half of our caucus is having to run for re-election with Donald Trump not in the White House, with a Democrat in the White House. And that's certainly going to be a little bit more of a challenge for folks. And we're not going to have as much wind at our back that we had in the last couple cycles. And so I say that not to scare anybody, but just to reemphasize the importance here. If Virginia swings, 3-4 points to the right, sure, we'll be fine with our governor's races and our statewide races, but we lose the House of Delegates. And that's a very scary thing to think about given the progress that we've made. So we're hard at work making sure that we're not waiting until after the primaries. And this is kind of tells into what we're doing at the party. In 2019, when we started our coordinated and our boots on the ground field program, you all, I'm sure, can remember Virginia was in the news in 2019 for much different reasons, thanks to a series of scandals and things that happened in our statewide offices. And that really pumped the brakes and hit the brakes on a lot of the organizing ability of the party and the caucuses to get stuff going sooner. And so we started really in earnest the coordinated in about July of 2019. Which was very late in the game and in the cycle, and that's something that we don't want to do again this year. So we've been working on starting actually in April 1, and starting April 1st, 20 districts will get an organizer on the ground across Virginia. That's the earliest we've started a coordinated campaign ever. We went out and got partnerships from the DNC, the DLCC, the Democratic Governors Association. Even though that they're not super invested right now in Virginia, they're waiting to see what the primary does. They're giving money to this effort because they know it's important to get boots on the ground now in these key districts, and to make sure that we are engaging our volunteers and get them ready to go as soon as we possibly can. So we've learned that lesson, and we're very quickly going down the path of getting organized sooner and quicker, which I know will hopefully, when you all eventually are able to come to Virginia in person safely, you all will see that difference, because as opposed to having a program that's kind of built while we're building the plane while we're flying it, we'll have a longer runway, and we'll be able to do some stuff that's very intentional. And that will, my hope is that will lead to a better volunteer experience for folks that are down here knocking on doors. That'll lead to a more organized campaign. It'll also lead to happier delegates and make life much easier for folks who are working directly with these candidates. And I think it'll also save money. This program is designed to make sure that our delegates do not have to spend any money on their field programs. We're out there, we're spending money, and we're putting up their field programs so that they can spend money doing things like direct voter contact through mailboxes, through digital, some will do TV, et cetera. So that's one huge piece. Another that I want to kind of mention is towards the end of last year, right after the presidentials was over, the party started to organize a bunch of partners together to go in on a pretty elaborate and expensive statewide poll that kind of can break down where, what is the state of the Virginia voter this year. We put that poll in the field. I think it was in late February, early March, to give a little bit of time for post January 6th and post inauguration, a little bit of time for the national waters to calm down a little bit. And we got some stuff that's both encouraging and some stuff that's also both a little something that makes us raise our ears, perk our ears up, and pay attention. There's kind of it's a catch-22, good and bad news. The average Virginia voter does not know that there is an election this year, and which did not surprise anybody on here, because that's the average Virginia voter. We're coming off of a very divisive 2020 election where you couldn't turn the corner without seeing something that reminded you of the election. So people are tuned out. But when we remind them of that there was an election, they were very excited to vote. That Trump very much was still a motivator in Virginia, even though he is not, in the White House. And there was very much a sense and a feeling that they wanted to get out and vote. And so I think that kind of translates into your all's goals and our goal, which is we need to let folks know about the election. We need to let folks know about the amazing progress that we've been made, or that's been made in Virginia these last 2 years. And if we do that effectively, then we will win. We will win in places that's even harder to win, down in Virginia Beach and the Richmond suburbs, and in some of these Prince William County, Loudoun districts that have flipped as of 2017. So I don't want to go on too much, Jim, but I'm happy to answer questions. These are just a couple of things that we're doing at the party to make sure that we're stepping up and taking taking charge and making sure that we're not resting on our laurels until too late. We've been waiting for this year. We knew that in Virginia in federal cycles, a lot of times the DCCC or the presidential campaign will come running in and kind of call the shots. And so we knew that was going to happen. So we kind of took a little bit of a step back last year and let our partners, national partners, do that, while all the while getting ready for this. And so we're extremely excited to work with you guys again this year. And I'm sure this will not be the first time that we all get to see each other. Hopefully we'll get to do that in person if it's safe to do so. So I don't know if there's any questions or if there's any, but if anybody has any, I'm happy to answer them. And again, just appreciate you all giving me some time today.
So Aaron, I do see at least one in the chat, but I'll go ahead and ask one myself, because the volunteer experience and making that part, that's near and dear to us, I can tell you. And you might recall that we had an exchange of emails not that long ago about Zoom training for canvassing, since ordinarily canvassing training is so seat of the pants and often really pretty bad. Have you got some more thinking about how you might go about doing that, or anything?
Yeah, so we put some thought into it, and what I want to do is, as opposed to making it look like it was done on the back of a napkin, I've been working with my digital folks, as well as another partner, the NDTC, which is the National Democratic Training Center, to try to put together something that will be hopefully Virginia specific, because I want to be able to use it like extensively this cycle to make it Virginia specific, and make it good enough that that folks like you and then folks like us can also just disperse and do. So that's something that's going to happen this year. We're just trying to make sure that it's not that it's done well, if that makes sense.
Well, I hope we can talk more offline about that too. Okay.
Happy to.
Hey, Andrew, it's Aaron Hamburger from 31st Street. How are you?
Good.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat, which I will just relay to you. So one question is, how long would you wait to start canvassing? I thought one lesson learned from 2020 was that we could have done more canvassing safely than was done.
Yeah, so I'll say this. I would by and large agree with that. We we are going to canvass in Virginia this year. We're going to do it safely, and we're going to make sure that we make sure that we are working with people that feel safe and comfortable doing it. My thought right now is that, so kind of my general timeline, and this is just me kind of like off the cuff, and I've got, shot number 2 COVID brain. So this might not be like the best in the world, but we've got our organizers starting in April 1. I imagine that a lot of what they're going to be doing this first month is really establishing a good culture amongst the volunteers that are present in district from 2019 and 2017 and the past few years. And so they'll be doing things like, engaging those grass top and grassroots folks that are in district. As soon as, and we're obviously the coordinated campaign is also a unionized organization. So we have to work with the union to make sure that we are providing, necessary safeties to, our organizers and et cetera, so they can do this in the right way. I'm not opposed. Like, I don't think, and I'm sure delegates would tell you that they're not opposed to getting started, like to start canvassing sooner than later. Some delegates are actually even pushing for canvassers to instead of like asking traditional questions of like, how are you going to vote? Are you going to support us this cycle? Maybe utilize, and Arlington actually has done this really well, and it made the Washington Post about pre-registering for your vaccine, or like doing some constituency service stuff in those districts that allows them to get out to those to their voters to perform a service, but then also bring up the fact that you're with insert delegate's name here, Delegate Danica Rome or whoever. And so that's something that we're thinking about doing. But it's a little bit of a trickier thing, because we now have to, instead of us just making a determination and a decision, we now have to work with a union to make sure that we're doing everything the right way, which is not a burden. And I don't want to say that in a bad way. It's just something that we want to do. And we want to make sure that we're checking in before, we just go out there and run. But I agree with your sentiment though. That we could have done more canvassing last year, and we're certainly not going to make that mistake in Virginia this year. Great.
Okay, we have one more question. How effective do you feel out-of-state canvassers are versus local people?
I think that they're effective. I think that and I think that this goes back to what Jim was saying earlier about making sure that we're that you all provide, like, we have a good training. I think that if you all are trained and know what it is to talk about, and you feel comfortable having that conversation, then I think it's just as effective. It certainly is a motivator for our delegates, and it certainly makes that excitement and that the realness of the election more palpable, and they certainly love it. I know that Delegate Nancy Guy, whenever I talk to her, she always will talk about just having a bunch of canvassers come and help her out, and that's something that she still thinks and talks about every single time that I talk to her. And so I think it certainly makes a difference. And like I mentioned earlier with our poll, if we can educate voters and let them know that an election's coming, and then also, talk about the historic change that we've made in Virginia these last 2 cycles, their motivation to vote goes through the roof. And so we just need to make sure that we're delivering that message. And I think that anybody can be can deliver that message effectively.
Great. Okay, actually 2 more questions just popped up. So one quick one, will you be doing any texting? And then a sort of broader one, what are the chances of holding a Democratic majority in the House of Delegates?
I'll do the first one. So we will be doing texting. We're working right now to try to figure out what organization or what platform we're going to go through. We think that in Virginia, what's really cool is that because we're really the only state in town other than New Jersey, a lot of these platforms like Hustle or Through Text really want to do be in Virginia, and so they'll work with us and provide deals that we can pass down to our candidates and we can offer. And so we haven't figured out what the platform is going to be this year, but we most certainly will be texting. And then in terms of what are the chances of us holding a Democratic majority, I think that we're going to hold a Democratic majority, but I do not think it's going to be easy to hold. I think that a lot of folks are because Virginia has trended so blue so quickly, I think are lulled into a false sense or a false narrative that, Virginia is a blue state, will be fine. But again, reminder that we're still running in a map that was gerrymandered for Republicans in 2010. We still have, Delegate Nancy Guy only won by a couple dozen votes. We're going to have a big dogfight in Ross Tyler's seat. We got 2 rural districts in Chris Hurst and Wendy Goditis and parts of Josh Coles that, now that Trump is not in the White House, will we have that same motivation to come out and vote on the Democratic side? In Chris Hurst district too, just like speaking from somebody that's worked in that spot, I can say definitively that if COVID prevents colleges to come back, because he has Virginia Tech and the University of Radford in his district, that will become very, 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 very hard for us to hold. And so we're going to have to work very hard to do that. So I think that we're going to hold it. I do not think it's a layup. And that's why we need everybody to really fight like hell with us to make sure that we can keep it.
Great. Okay. So we know that you're, kind of dealing with that second COVID shot. So we don't want to take too much of your time.
You're good. You are giving me my second wind talking about.
Good. Okay. We'll take 2 more questions and we'll let you go. And, if folks have other questions, we can convey those to you via email later on. So the next question is, do you feel digital outreach is effective?
Yes, I think that one of the things that we did, now I'll say this, and we're trying to work and we're trying to do this in a very smart way this year with our partners. What oftentimes happens is, a lot of our in-state partners, kind of on the softer side of things, not like the party or the caucuses, they'll get funding a little later in the campaign. And what'll often happen is like, they'll just be, because it's so late, they'll throw it on digital. And so I think that digital is effective, but I think that we've got to be better in Virginia this year on making sure that we have everything that we need to communicate effectively online and digitally, but also to understand that if we are, if we're just throwing money at the sake of throwing money to something, then that sometimes that's not, we can spend it a little bit more effectively and try to channel it. So what we're doing on the back end is making sure that we're talking to all of our partners and defining what our digital need and our digital gap is, filling that gap, and working with people like Christine Bachman to make sure that we all are, that everybody understands what that gap is. But then if there's an additional, money that falls out of the sky very late, which often happens because people, will get scared by a poll or something, trying to figure out, okay, where can we use this money more effectively and the most effectively to fill additional needs. And so I think that digital, communicating digitally is super effective. I think that we have done a pretty good job in Virginia of proving that to be the case, but we want to make sure that we're even even a better, smoother run operation this year, so that we know exactly what our need and what our gap is, and not just throw money for the sake of throwing money at something, which sometimes it makes it less of like a little bit not as effective. You're kind of just not spending money in the best way that you could be spending it. So we're having those conversations now, and they're proven to be good. We'll keep our fingers crossed, and I think we'll be in a much better place at the end of this cycle, I think.
Okay. And then a question about calling. Some people will only be available to make calls this cycle. Is there going to be any sort of special training or support for callers?
Yeah. So what we were thinking with Jim's question about doing the like a sending around a link or a video for a Canvas training, we're thinking about repurposing and doing the same thing for calling as well. And obviously calling can take many different, avenues based on the type of call it is, whether it's, just an ID call, persuasion call, or a GATV call. So it's a little bit different, but we're trying to work out and kind of be a little bit more like thinking down the road a little bit about the types of calls we're going to make, so that we can have those videos on standby, so that we can send out to folks who want to make calls for us. But yes, we're going to make sure that we're going to provide that And also with the video, we'll also have, somebody I'm sure that will be there to do this, via Zoom if you need it, if you need additional thoughts. But I think that what we want to be able to do is, a lot of you guys have done this before and probably don't need to hear another repetitive, 30-minute training that you kind of already know, what it is, or what the training is going to be about. And so we want to kind of, use your all's time more effectively and make sure that we can get, people right on the calls if they need to, right on the phones if they want to be.
Great. As we wind up, there was a question that popped up, and maybe Jim, I know you wanted to say something, maybe you can even fill in some of the detail. Andrew, I don't know if you were here when Jim was talking about changing our messaging, maybe a less economic and more emotional issue focused messaging approach. I'm not sure if the questioner had that exactly correct, but thinking about what would resonate and what kinds of messages would resonate in key parts of Virginia. I know, Jim, you were talking about a race class narrative.
Well, but that's very much economic. It's actually blending the economic message right in with that.
Yeah, so Jim, I'm sure that you're going to, you're probably going to get this, our partners polling briefing, so you can see this as well. But one of the things that we're trying to do right now is that we tested a series of issues on the statewide poll, and we did get some things that popped and some things that that came back that was a little surprising. One of the things that actually did come back higher than people expected was and it makes a lot of sense dealing when you're talking about post-COVID economy and that kind of stuff. But people right now in Virginia, the economy and jobs and this message, that's what's on their mind. And so it varies a little bit by region. And obviously, as we get further into the cycle, we'll have some individual district level polls that we're going to get from that's going to actually be able to give us a much more nuanced look into some of these districts and places. But I think Jim is right in that I think this year we are going to have to look at what Democrats are doing to make sure that we're building back better, much like what you heard from President Biden, and do it and make that argument and make that point a salient point in what we're running and what we're talking about. So, I don't know if that necessarily answers your question. Then Jim, you're going to get, I'm sure you'll get the briefing on this at some point. We're trying to cycle through with the caucus right now and do that and provide that. But for what it's worth, that's kind of what we're seeing in the in our statewide polls.
Okay, so 3 pieces of very quick feedback. One is, I understand along with that polling that you did qualitative research as well. So yeah. Kudos to you for doing that. Second, great that you're proceeding on the training. I think it's good to think about having some in-person training along with, a video is great to learn how to use a minivan, but I think having somebody talk about what it's been like to do the canvassing. This was actually very good. The Biden campaign in Pennsylvania did this, at least for me. I thought it was very effective. And the third thing is that in addition to supporting the field organizers, my understanding is that you're at least partially supporting a lot of the campaign managers for these. And the other feedback is the campaign managers I've talked to seem really good. So I think you've got a really good crop of campaign managers, and it does speak to when you have a good enlightened leadership in the party, you can do things that have good quality and quantity instead of these sort of individual, every person for themselves kind of procedure we used to have.
Right. Yeah, no, well, and what Jim's talking about is we are working with the Blue Leadership Collaborative who are providing really quality, good campaign managers to all the delegates races that we need to hold, and then hopefully post primary, back in places like currently Elizabeth Guzman's district and others. So it's been fun though. I mean, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier. We've been kind of plotting and thinking about how this is going to work for several months now. And we feel like that we're really ready. And then one thing that I do want to mention too is that Virginia is going to be fun this year because we've never really. Last year was the first year that we had early vote, but we really did not get to take advantage of that in the way that we wanted to because of the hesitancies about knocking on doors and doing that stuff. We get to do that this year, and we get to we have a much longer runway than what we're used to in Virginia. And so we feel good about that. And we think that we're going to, that's going to help us out tremendously as well. The one thing that we did want to do at the party last year to get ready for this year was we wanted to own voter protection. And so we didn't think that it would be that much of a huge integral piece into everything in Virginia. But then when COVID hit, obviously voter protection became the front and center of almost every single state because you had, how are people going to vote? And it was impacting their daily lives. And so we actually ended up having more of a say last year than we've normally had in federal races. But we do think that because we have owned that voter protection space, we're going to get ready to walk right into it again this year and start right now by reaching out to these local electoral board and registrar's offices and make sure that we're expanding early vote opportunities. We just had a bill this year in Virginia that Delegate Bagby, the chair of our legislative Black Caucus, carried it that allowed for Sunday voting as well. And so we'll get to run an actual Souls to the Polls program in Virginia this year, which we've talked about and we've kind of done, but not in a real way. But this year we'll get to do it. So there's a lot of fun stuff. I'm really looking forward to this year.
Okay, so I don't know if Lisa, I'll go ahead and say, I'm really glad you got your second wind from the vaccine. Second, as a public health physician, the bright side is if you're feeling bad from the vaccine, it means it's probably working really well. So that's the great side of it. And thank you so very much for what you're doing and for tuning in with us.
Thank you so much. I've tried not to complain about the vaccine just for that reason alone.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Thanks so much.
Over to you, Lisa.
Well, Jim, I was wondering if you wanted to just check in with the audience to see just any thoughts, reactions. I thought Andrew was great.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, I think this thing about pushing ads early and pushing maybe less resistant, but pushing ads that would kind of hold people accountable more. That's kind of pushing the envelope for folks in general. That's not really in their playbook that much, but that's all the more reason why it's great to have Chris Bachman working with individual campaigns to kind of push that envelope. I see Martha's got a question related. I hope that answers her question. His name's Andrew, by the way, not Adam.
Yes, I blew it. Yeah,
okay.
I realized that. Martha. Does Martha have a question?
I think I answered. I'm hoping I answered.
Yeah, I think it was George's question on my computer, but that's right. you answered it.
Any other comments just before we move on? Yeah, Jeff.
I had written, we may not have Trump to kick around, but we got lots of Trump clones. Including one who refers to herself as Trump in heels, I believe. And I was wondering how we might take advantage of that, lest we lose this sort of motivation for people to get out and vote, lest Trump take over.
Well, I mean, if you're asking me, I mean, my view, I mean, in general, campaigns have been reluctant to take on Trump, which I think is a mistake. You may recall in 2019, we actually paid for an anti-Trump video that was played in about 6 or 7 districts. I think there's a way to associate, just as for years, the right-wing extremists sort of demonized Nancy Pelosi. And then they would say, oh, this is Pelosi, this candidate is another Pelosi. And I mean, I don't know the details, but I think there are ways to hold these candidates. Some are really egregious, like the one in, I'm blocking on his name, 33, Martha can tell me, who actually, was supportive of the insurrection. And Amanda Chase. I mean, there are people like that are just LaRock.
Yes.
But I think there's a way to hold all of them accountable for this Republican agenda. And again, this is one of the problems that, even though the party's coming together and sort of working these races somewhat more in tandem, they're still kind of individual. And there's nobody that sends out an ad that says, we need to keep a Democratic legislature in Virginia, and here's why. I wish they would. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jeff, but I do think there's mileage there.
So I have a question. Andrew was saying that if Virginia Tech and other universities aren't in person in this fall, that will make it a lot more difficult in some of the regions where they are. I don't know why he even,
I have every expectation that they'll be in session in the fall. I don't know why he even broached that hypothetical, to tell you. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I don't know. And I guess even if you make that assumption, I don't really see why, because most students are registered where they live with their parents. So
I don't think they have to be.
No, they don't have to be. But in general, probably, especially following a year when they weren't living on campus, they probably mostly would be.
Yeah, they might shift it. It may be difficult to shift them back if you even wanted to. No, I mean, I think it does make the registration process more trickier. But they can vote by mail much easier than they did before, and so forth. So that's all good.
Jim, to your point, could Chris Bachman make a more generic, Trump clones ad? And could it be?
I think she would like to do sort of generic ads. But then, I mean, we don't have the resources to, pay for broadcasting statewide. So then it has to be very targeted. It wouldn't necessarily be just the Trump issue. It would be it'd be based on data, and she's got that in mind. That's actually part of what she has in mind. How far she can sort of market that, given that we're basically, we're trying to kickstart her, but then we're hoping beyond that she's going to take care of everything.
Any other comments? That was lively questioning. Thanks. If anybody wants us to forward a question to him and then just ask him to email us back the answers so we can answer your questions, we're happy to do that. But he was valiant in his ability to stay here and do that despite feeling so sick. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Mary Pence to just bring us up to date on some of her outreach to other grassroots groups in building a coalition.
So just riffing on that last point, Chris Bachman, we set a goal of raising $40,000 and we've raised 32. This would be to jumpstart, I guess is as good a phrase as any, her green room filming of 25 candidates to get enough footage to create whatever ads are needed to address whatever issue or whatever developments in the future. So if you have not contributed yet, I believe I can see that Aaron just put the link in the chat. If we could get that last $8,000, that would allow us to keep our unbroken record, the unbroken 31st Street record, that there's never been a fundraising goal that we've set that we have not met. So shifting to my real topic, we started in February of 2017. And in those 4 cycles, election cycles, we bumped up against various other grassroots groups that started like we did, out of the despair and fury after Trump was elected. And so just recently, within the last month or maybe 6 weeks, I've been reaching out to those groups. Jim and I together, we have a little 1-2 routine that we do. Of course, he's got all the data and I've got the personality. Are you going to counter that, Jim?
So I was reading a message from our sister Dorothy in the chat. I'm sorry, Mary, go ahead.
That's all right. I was just trying to tweak you a little bit unsuccessfully. So we have now reached out to 9 of these groups, and they are interested in collaborating with us. And I have 8 more on my list that for one reason or another, the connection has not been finalized. The concept is just that the more of us focusing on similar strategy, the more effective we can be. And these groups range from 60 members to 1,700 members. So at Lisa's request, I'm just giving you a very brief update that this initiative is underway. There'll be a first meeting of this coalition of groups on the 18th of April, and we'll see if working together can make us even more effective in this 21-22 cycle.
So Mary, I have to say that's a very nice birthday dress or blouse that you have on today. So very, very good.
Mary's birthday?
Yes.
Happy birthday, Mare.
Thank you.
Mary, just a point of clarification, are these grassroots groups like ours?
They are. Most of them are in like Rockville or Arlington or Southwest DC or Annapolis, but we have one in Vermont, one in California, one in New Orleans. So I had a question from Susan Lyon, if I'm interested in more groups. Absolutely. So if you have a group, I won't worry about putting the list in there, but if you have a group, send me the name and the email address. And then if you could make the introduction saying, you know, hey, Mary, I'm connecting you in this email to so-and-so. So yes, we would, if you want me to read the list, it's Waterfront Indivisible, that's in DC, East Bay Alliance, California, Tommy Houston's group in New Orleans, Tracy Place Women's Action Group in DC, We Have Action in Arlington, Do the Most Good, Montgomery County, Like-Minded Women, Annapolis, Swing Left, Rockville, Lean Left, Vermont. Those are the ones I've done, and I'm working on Take Back the Senate, Annapolis, Nope Neighbors here in DC. There's an expatriate group in London, if you can believe, Arlington Blue Families, Force Multiplier, Silver Spring Progressive Action, and Beyond Arlington.
So a question, Mary, I'm not sure I understand the objective of connecting. If you're on the one hand connecting with local groups and then on the other hand with faraway groups, how does that fit together?
Good question. So the intent is, I mean, we in 31st Street, we just made this up as we went along. None of us knew what we were doing. We did not have a clue. And we just ended up with a complementary set of leaders with complementary skill sets and just took on different jobs and forged a path forwards. Of course, Jim is always our North Star. He, with his data-driven approach and the very broad net that he casts, getting information and data from so many different sources, I believe he gives us a fabulous strategy. And then we've been very effective in mobilizing volunteers for field work and in raising a lot of money. We raised $3.85 million in 2020. So if we can help some other groups be more effective by sharing our data or our techniques with them, and if we might form some common goals around fundraising, focusing in particular on North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, possibly Georgia. It's not clear yet. Georgia is in the, we have to wait until things unfold a little bit more category. But if we could get 15 groups, for example, all focusing on the same or complementary strategies in North Carolina, we can be much more effective than just 31st Street. Does that make sense? At the same time, we want to be open to learning from them. maybe they have a strategy or an approach that we haven't thought of that we'd like to adopt.
Yeah, Beth, we've had enough interaction with these groups to realize there's plenty of opportunity for collaboration at a bunch of different levels. You know, there's a group in Bay Area, they want to support delegate races in Virginia. They just want to know who we want to support, basically. But there, you know, there's a group in Vermont where Ann Smith, she's very well connected to Wisconsin. So she's a really good informer for us if the time might occur for us to maybe want to do something in Wisconsin. I mean, that's just a couple of, there's fundraising technique. There's another sort of, anyway, there are just many points of collaboration. But it's what networking is. Over.
Thanks. Good.
So,
Thanks.
yeah, hi, Alvar. So I may have missed a bit of a transition from Virginia to this discussion, but harking back to Jim's statement about deep canvassing, I was assuming that we would be looking for a group in Virginia that's analogous to the Georgia Alliance for Progress that we worked with in Georgia, which actually was actually a consortium of multiple smaller groups, but that coordinated and funded, that actually were there and were deeply connected with their own communities and their voter pools, and actually engaged in that sort of deep canvassing and built on that to help move things in Georgia. So I guess my question is, are we looking for a group like that in Virginia? And what's the likelihood that that group exists, and how can we find them?
Well, the truth is we've been focusing more on the election. You know, we sort of flirted with the idea, not just of looking for something like that, but also maybe some 365-day a year grassroots group in a strategic place in Virginia. I'm actually not aware, and it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I'm actually not aware of such a group that operating in. It's funny how each of these states has a very different kind of ecosystem about how they operate. So up to now, we haven't found that targeted opportunity. So I guess we're in the general question session now, right? So any people have any questions?
Yeah, well, Catherine has a question just about whether there's anything we think we might do to strengthen Senator Manchin's.
I wrote an email back to her. I didn't notice that she wrote her question to the whole group. It's a great idea. If I came across any West Virginia group, I would glom onto them. But to this point, I have not become aware of any grassroots groups in West Virginia.
So Catherine, that's basically what we're funneling people to for this thing on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Our understanding is, here's Betsy, she's going to fill it, but they are supporting groups in these states that are going to reach out. Did you want to add something to that, Betsy?
I don't have the names right in front of me, but they have found some grassroots groups in West Virginia. And that, yeah, if you get on the call on Wednesday, you'll learn more about it. And if you can't, we'll get information.
Thank you.
Also, there are some groups in Virginia, I think, that are doing some good work. I can try to do some research on that.
Great, thank you.
So we are members of the Virginia Grassroots Coalition. They're mostly people like us. They're like, which is good. And they've been helpful and effective, and we treasure that relationship.
Any other comments? We're going to wind up, but any other comments before we say goodbye for the day? Thank you for all of your questions and suggestions and announcements of other things that are going on. As Jim said, you know, we give anybody our blessing to do anything you want in the area of resistance and persistence. And if you need help finding something, feel free to ask us. If we're not doing it, we'll try to help you connect with people that are. Susan Lyon is just noting there are postcard campaigns now to register voters in Virginia. So sort of whatever you're looking for, we'll try to hook you up if you haven't found it. We are going to have our first roundtable meeting in April. You'll get reminders for that. For those of you who have never been to a roundtable meeting, those meetings are just 1 hour. They're on Thursdays at 5, just one Thursday a month at 5. They just tend to be much more heavily focused on discussion. Jim usually shares some information, but it's sort of more of a discussion focused meeting. So we will start back with our roundtables in April, and we'll have another monthly meeting in April. And we welcome you all back to that one. And we'll see you soon. Thanks for coming today.